Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to this session on monitoring project communications. First thing first, what is project communications? Let's take a hypothetical case. Let's say I have this report with me and I have to share this report to other stakeholders of a project. And let's take the formal way of doing it, not informal ways like WhatsApp. That is, we'll send an email. So the first thing to be done is to convert this paper document into a digital form. That done, we have to send this document as an attachment to an email. Once that is done, we have composed the email, we'll send it, for which we need an internet. Or if this file is too heavy, then we'll place it on a cloud server, and share the link with the recipients, and they will be able to download it, what is referred to as the push and pull communications. And then if they want at their end a printout of what they have downloaded, they will obviously require a printer. So I have said a lot of physical nouns in this little example. We started with a paper copy, then digitization. For digitization, we require a camera or a scanner. Then composing an email, so we need a laptop or a tab or any mobile device or a desktop. Then we have to send this email, for which we require a medium, an internet, or a cloud server. And the same thing is repeated at the end of the recipients. All these physical nouns I have mentioned refer to or categorized as project communications. In short, everything and anything to do with communications is project communications. Looking at the formal definition of project communications, here are 3 bullets to take us through. Project communications are activities. Just I refer to one activity, the activity of sending a document via email to an X number of recipients or the project stakeholders. So these are the activities that are required for information to be created, distributed, received, acknowledged, and understood. That is what, where, how, and when of communications. Or in other words, everything and anything to do with project communications is project communications. Then these activities or project communications, they vary very significantly in their format, level of detail, degree of formality and confidentiality. Email is very different from a desktop. So that is what is being referred to in this particular bullet. And then project communications are influenced by a number of factors like messages urgency, email versus, let's say, courier, the impact, the format, the confidentiality, time, audience, method of delivery, level of confidentiality, scope of distribution, etc. And one can spend hours on each of these aspects, but suffice to say that project communications are a function of all these things. Or in other words, these are the independent variables if we consider project communications to be a dependent variable with reference to regression analysis, which was the subject of the last video. With this understanding, let us see what is monitoring project communications, which is the subject of this session. Again, it is very important to understand why the book uses the term monitor communications and not control communications. Up to PMBOK 5, including PMBOK 5, project communications were to be controlled. Why? To ensure that all project communications were in compliance with the project communication management plan. But PMBOK 6 introduced a radical change. And they said, no, we cannot control communications. At best, we can monitor communications. And their reason for saying so was based on these two arguments. It is not possible to control how and when people communicate. And project managers tend to monitor, facilitate, and manage rather than control communications or control process, particularly those processes that involve human interaction. In my opinion, these two statements or these two arguments are highly debatable or, in fact, controversial. It is not possible to control how and when people communicate. Is that so? Don't we do it in our daily life? And then project managers tend to monitor. Why can't they control? Does this mean that in some of the situations which I'm going to mention to you, a project manager will just sit idly and watch and not step in to control the situation? Consider such situation as a project team member violates the basic communication rule to communicate the right message with the right content, the right audience, to the right channel, and at the right time. So if a project team member is in violation of this doctrine of communication, basic doctrine of communication, won't you step in or won't you control to correct him? Or you just watch and report perhaps? Likewise, if you are sitting in a project review meeting and a stakeholder infringes the rules of business, which we are going to discuss towards the end of this session, wouldn't you stop him from doing that? And what is stopping? Stopping is not monitoring. It is an active action, control action. Monitoring is passive. And of course, one can narrate an X number of situations where, in fact, a project manager actually actively controls communication and not just monitors. Okay, having said this, let's see if the project, if PMBOK 6 is also in sync with the TORs of monitoring communications. Let's see the TORs. This is simple copy and paste from the PMBOK. I haven't added a word. All I have done is just bulletized those 2 or 3 paragraphs in the book. The first 3 bullets are very interesting. They say, ensure. Monitoring communication ensures that the information needs of the project and its stakeholders are met. Monitor communications ensures that the right message, the right content, the right audience, the right channel, and the right time philosophy is being followed religiously by all the project team members and the stakeholders. And then it determines, it ensures optimal information flow as per communications management and stakeholder plan. The question arises, what if the information needs of the project and its stakeholders are not met? Or what if the right message, right content, right audience, right channel, right time philosophy is not being followed? or the flow of information is not optimal. Does the project manager do nothing? Of course, he intervenes. Intervention means control action. Therefore, in my humble opinion, this dictum about project manager being capable of monitoring communications and not capable is not correct. A project manager does indeed control communications. If we look at other bullets, of course, they are very much monitoring actions, very passive actions. A project manager does not need to intervene all this. For instance, monitoring communication determines if the project, if the planned communications is leading to the desired stakeholders' support. That means what this bullet means is that the project communications is contributing to the creating of correct project deliverables. Yes, determining is of course a monitoring action. Then using tools. This bullet mentions different tools a project manager has at his disposal to collect information like surveys, observations, lessons learned, issue log, etc., etc. This, of course, is a monitoring action. Then, based on this, he would like to detect key performance indicators, risks, conflicts, etc. Of course, a monitoring action, and perform throughout the project, of course, perform throughout the project. So clearly in this charter or terms of reference, which the PMBOK has mentioned for the project manager in the context of communications management, the first three bullets pertain to control and the remaining bullets pertain to monitoring. I have looked at this from the perspective of management. Since I also teach a class of MBA, so I was constrained to compare the management philosophy of PMI or PMBOK 6 with the management philosophy of what we teach and preach in MBA. So I would like to take a minute to allude to that. This is what management is according to established management practices. Management comprises 4 functions: planning, organizing, leading, monitoring, and controlling. They are interdependent and interlinked. If we add the word project management here, then of course, planning, organizing, leading, and monitoring and controlling all forms part of project management. Or if we add communication management here, again, all these things, all these little bubbles fall into the big bubble of management. What PMBOK has done is they have simply taken out the planning and monitoring bubbles out of management. They consider them to be something different. The management philosophy is that management is an all-inclusive concept which involves all these 4 things. The PMBOK philosophy is to keep all these 4 things separate in the form of 5 process groups: planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, closing, and of course, I missed the initiating to start with. So it is this dichotomy which is confusing the scholars. At least I'm confused as to why PMBOK indulges in such things as being monitoring communications and not controlling communications, and is the process of monitoring and controlling intrinsic to management or it is extrinsic to management. So these are the confusions which PMBOK 6 has because of deviations from the established practices of management. With this, let's now see what is the project communications knowledge area, a fairly simple knowledge area. It has only three processes: plan, communication management, and we get communication management plan. And this is a very strong output. In fact, this, in my opinion, is the only meaningful management plan in the entire gamut of 10 knowledge areas. Others just tell you how to do management in that particular knowledge area. But communication management plan is an actual management plan uh, on the basis of which the other management plans should also have been devised. The key output of communication management plan, or the established or perhaps recommended format of this communication management plan, is as shown. This is a typical communication management plan. It has such headings: what needs to be communicated. Well, let's say we have to communicate the minutes of the project review meeting. Why these need to be communicated? We need to communicate so that all the stakeholders are informed of the project status. Okay, to whom or between whom you are going to communicate these minutes of the meeting? All stakeholders who have both authority and interest. And here you would recall the stakeholder matrix, the power interest matrix. We have interest on one axis, authority on the other axis. And here we are essentially talking about the top right-hand quadrant, where the stakeholder enjoys maximum authority as well as he has maximum interest in the project. So these minutes are to be communicated to such stakeholders, not to those stakeholders who have authority but no interest, or who have interest but no authority, and who have neither. Okay, what is the best means of communicating these minutes to these stakeholders? Email them as a PDF attachment. Who is responsible for doing this? Of course, the project manager. And when and how often this exercise is to be done, okay, within 24 hours of concluding the meeting. So this is an actual plan which needs to be followed, or in fact, this you can call the communications baseline. Then, of course, we have managed communications, which results in project communications, and then we have monitor communications, which results in these standard outputs. And again, my opinion is that monitor communications are just a part of managed communications. There's no point in separating the two. Let us now look at this process, monitor communications, its inputs and outputs. To start with, we always have general inputs, permanent inputs, because it is communications, so we need communications management plan, the permanent input of lessons learned register, the WPD, OPA, WPI, and change request. By the way, when I had mentioned different types of project communications, I forgot to mention WPD, WPI, and WPR also as project communications. So any WPD, any WPI, or any WPR, to whatever knowledge area they belong, is also project communications. And that would be reflected over here as an input. Let's look at some specific inputs. What else, if we are monitoring communications, what else do we require? Well, of course, we require stakeholder engagement plan. Why? Because it tells us how we are going to communicate with those stakeholders. And then resources management plan. This should be something interesting. Why do we require a resources management plan? We require a resources management plan because this plan tells us the project organization. Is it a functional organization? Is it a matrix organization? If so, is it a weak matrix or a strong matrix? Or is it a projectized organization? Because all these three basic formats of organizations have different hierarchies. They have different lines of authority and hence different communication channels. So it is important to know that all those communication channels are active and the communication requirements of all the people, all the managers, all the stakeholders in that organization, all the office holders in that organizations are being met. So that is why we require a resources management plan. Then I'll discuss this later, but we need issue log. We need issue log for two reasons. One, because many issues are created due to lack of communication or due to miscommunication. So we need the issue log. And then we require issue log for another purpose, because every issue log, there's a column. Responsibility. Who is going to be responsible for resolving this issue? If that person has to resolve an issue, he needs to be equipped with necessary skills for resolving the communication, the issue, and then he has to communicate what the status of that particular issue. Therefore, we require the communication log, and of course, stakeholder register, because that will spell out all the communication channels which are to be created with different stakeholders. I have put asterisks in front of communications, WPD and WPA. This is the inputs which PMBOK 5 had for the control communications process. But since PMBOK 6 has reduced or relegated this process to monitor communications, it has taken out project communications, WPD, and WPA. I don't know why, because these three are still required for monitoring communications. If we are monitoring project communications, don't we need project communications as an input? Do we want to know whether the server is down? Do we know that a particular communication has been acknowledged by a recipient? So we do require project communications. So this asterisk means that these are the inputs from PMBOK 5, but missing from PMBOK 6. Well, now I'm going to show you, or just going to flash past the slides, just to show you what the rationale for these inputs, rationale for communications management plan, rationale for stakeholder engagement plan, resources management plan, which I have already discussed. So I'm just showing you that you can consult these slides in your notes to find the detailed justification of these being inputs. Then here, why do we require the lessons learned register, the issue log, and the project communications, which we have already discussed in detail, so we can skip that, although it is given in detail on the next slide, which we have already discussed, so no point going over it again. And then what is going to be the nature of WPD? Well, as I said earlier, every WPD, whether it is for control schedule, control cost, for perform integrated change control, every WPD is also a WPD for monitor communications process. Organizational process assets, all your policies on communication, the points of contact, the the cryptography, the codes, the classification, etc., all those things are covered in OPA for this purpose. And of course, environmental factors. What is the organizational culture in your project organization? Can a project team member directly go and meet the project sponsor, or he has to proceed via the project manager? So things like that are unique for monitoring communications effectively. Then the outputs, these are all updates. Whatever is on the left-hand side gets updated. So perhaps change request, again, I would say, because every WPD and WPI of any knowledge area is also a WPD and WPI of monitor communications. Therefore, every change request is also an output of monitor communications project. Why? Because every change has to be communicated. The status of every change, the change has been accepted or rejected, has to be communicated. So every change request is also an output of monitor communications process. Also, purely from the communications point of view, let us say a new project team member has joined your project team and you want to give him a walkie-talkie. So for that, to give him a walkie-talkie, you will initiate a change request because that wasn't initially sanctioned. Maybe it was sanctioned, or if it was not sanctioned, you would like to initiate a change request to be able to give him the walkie-talkie. Now we come to the tools and techniques, and there we find that our favorite tool, expert judgment. If you think there are problems in your communication, there are communication voids, there is miscommunication, there is over-communication or under-communication, there is always someone to give you advice or expertise. So you can consult a communications expert to solve your communication problems. Project management information systems like project server, project MS project, Primavera, etc. These are, for the time being, they suffer in one thing, that they are standalone. They do not offer what I will refer to as one window operation. What do I mean by one window operation? By that I mean that, take MS project. It doesn't offer you the chat module. It doesn't offer you the video conferencing module. It doesn't offer you the email module. So these PMISs have a limitation for the timing that they are standalone. However, we are getting one window PMISs like Team. MS Project Teams is an excellent tool where you find all the tools. And very soon, I think they are going to introduce, or they're going to put MS Project into Teams, and then it would be a wonderful one window PMIS, which will also cater to project communications and the project as a whole. Data representation we'll deal with when we discuss the next topic, which is stakeholder engagement, monitoring stakeholder engagement. There you will find such thing as stakeholder engagement assessment matrices, etc., or stakeholder engagement plan. And we will, inshallah, discuss this when we come to monitor stakeholder engagement. What is left is meetings and interpersonal skills, and I'm going to devote the rest of the time to these two aspects. So What are meetings? Of course, it is stating the obvious. It is a face-to-face interaction between people. In project management, meetings have to follow a set protocol. This protocol has to be followed before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. Before the meeting, the rules of business have to be formulated. And this is a one-time exercise which applies to all the subsequent meetings you will hold as project manager. What are rules of business? These tell you something as how frequently this meeting is to be called. Who are the members who are going to attend this meeting? Who are going to attend this meeting as participants, and who are going to attend these meetings as in attendance or as members? What is going to be the process for putting up agenda points? How is the business to be conducted? How is the meeting to be conducted? How will the decisions be taken? Etc., etc. So these are the rules of business which you formulate for every project review meeting or for any other meeting on the project. And again, as I said, this is not only one-time exercise which you will do for the project, which perhaps you will do one time only in your careers. Once you have formulated rules of business, you can carry them wherever you go, and they will be applicable to that organization also, of course, with a bit of modification. Then you must schedule recurring meetings in advance. What are recurring meetings on a project? The project review meeting. You will have to do this, conduct this meeting every week or every fortnight or every month. And this frequency is defined in the communications management plan. So on the planner, say upfront, or maybe on the Gantt chart, say so that project review meeting is going to be held on a particular day. You can even insert in the Gantt chart a project review meeting as an activity, as a standalone activity. So do this planning in advance. Meet with the team regularly, but not too often. What does that mean? If you do not meet the team regularly, then there are chances of communication voids, communication barriers, communication blockers, which I'll discuss subsequently. But at the same time, not too often. Why? Because there's a very popular Urdu dictum, "Qadr kho deta hai roz ka aana jana." So don't bother the people. They'll get fed up with you. So strike a balance. How frequently you should meet the foreman, how frequently you should meet the schedule manager, etc. And meeting is not just physical meeting, it could also be a virtual meeting, a video conferencing, a telephone call, an SMS, because if you do it too often, people do get annoyed. Have a purpose of each meeting. Do not hold a meeting if it has no purpose. It is as simple as that. For example, project review meeting. It has a purpose to review the progress of the project. As simple as that. Because if you have a purpose to a meeting, then you will focus on the purpose. And anything which does not serve the purpose of the meeting, you will discard. So you will be able to control the meeting in a much better manner if you have a purpose of that meeting. And again, I have said you will be able to control the meeting because you are presiding over the meeting. You are not just monitoring the meeting, you are controlling the meeting. Then create an agenda with the team input and distribute it in well in advance. Well, if a point is not on the agenda of the meeting, it doesn't get discussed. It is as simple as that. Only those points which cannot await the next meeting can be taken up as any other points. Otherwise, you have to create the agenda and then bring the right people to get together. We have a fashion in our meetings that the members bring their sidekicks. And there is a good Urdu word for that, taktilis. They bring their sidekicks or taktilis with them who assist them in carrying the files, the documents. They sit with them or behind them, and they offer them advice as the meeting progresses. No, get rid of all those taktilis or sidekicks. Only the meeting is only for the members, and members should be able to participate in the discussion and contribute meaningfully. If they are not, they have no reason or business to be a member of that meeting. So this is what you do before the meeting. Now the meeting starts, you are in the chair. So manage and lead with authority. Manage and lead with authority. You cannot do that if you are simply monitoring. You are controlling. You're controlling communications. This falls into the parlance of controlling communications. Then communicate for effect. Do not talk to the walls. Talk to the people. And if they are not listening to you, stop. For example, if you are conducting a meeting, chairing a meeting, and someone is indulging in chat with another member, or someone is busy on his laptop or on his mobile, snub them straight away. This is against the etiquette of the meeting. No mobiles, no mutual chat, no mutual communication. If some member has to communicate with another member, then he or she must take your permission. Mr. Chairman, do I have the permission to talk to the other member? So communicate for effect. Do not talk to the walls, talk to the people, leave an impact. Stick to the agenda and the rules of the business. If you do that, you will have a much meaningful, much focused meeting. Agenda, we have already discussed. Rules of business, if you follow them, you will have a much better control over the meeting. Otherwise, it would be a fish market. Set a time limit for every member. If someone wants to make a presentation, the schedule manager wants to present the modified Gantt chart, tell him, Mr. So-and-so, you have 5 minutes to do that. Why we do that? Because it is our habit that whenever we are making a presentation, we start from 1947 when Pakistan was created. They don't tend to focus. So set a time limit. Say, you have 5 minutes to do this, or 10 minutes, depending, of course, upon the content the person has to present. Then assign deliverables and give time limits. For instance, if there is a sticky issue which you cannot decide there and then, what you could do is form a research group or a committee and tell them that, Mr. So-and-so, you are going to head a committee comprising of so-and-so and so-and-so to investigate or probe or study this particular problem. And I would like a report of your proceedings on my table by 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 20th of April. So you have assigned the deliverable, the report, and you have set a time limit by such and such date and time. And importantly, record minutes of the meeting. Of course, you should have a secretary to do that, but if not, then you have to do it yourself. And what you can do is record minutes and not the narrative. That means only record the important points of the meeting and decisions of the meeting, and then put them in the minutes of the meeting and promulgate. But essentially, you should have a secretary, or you could assign someone. You can assign let's say, the schedule manager to act as the secretary, or any member who doesn't have an agenda point for the meeting. You can assign him this job of secretary and recording the minutes of the meeting. So the meeting is over. What do we do now? Finalize and publish the minutes of the meeting as soon as possible. I have attended meetings where the minutes of the meeting were promulgated as soon as the meeting was over. What the chairman would do, he would read out every decision after the decision would be taken. The secretary would have minuted it. And then at the end of the meeting, he would say, okay, secretary, go over the minutes or resolutions of the meeting. The secretary would go over the meetings. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, any objection, any comment? No, everyone is happy. Okay, secretary, send the mail. And the minutes are sent there and then. See if you can achieve that standard. And then follow up on the deliverables and time limits. When you said, okay, the progress report should be on my table by 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 20th April. 20th April is a long way away. So you might ask for progress reports. So you could say, okay, whereas I've asked you to give me the report by 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 20th April, I would expect an interim report or a progress report on 12th of April. So this way, you are now communicating to the committee or to the group who is studying the problem that, look, you are serious. And when you set that deadline, you mean it. And any delays would have implications. So follow up on the deliverables and set time limits. So this is how you should conduct project meetings. Some of the tips, well, not all the tips, but some of the tips, but I hope that should help you conduct an effective, meaningful meeting. What are the types of meetings? The status meetings, which we have already discussed. Let's look at another very interesting type of meeting called the stand-up meetings. In some projects where you must meet off and on, not after 2 weeks or after a week, like in software projects, a glitch can come anytime, and therefore you should meet immediately. You cannot wait for 2 weeks to discuss that glitch in the project review meeting. So for that purpose, on such projects, there is this concept of stand-up meetings. You meet over a cup of tea, either at the beginning of the work, or at the end of the work, or at both times, or additionally during the tea break. Meet as casually as shown in this slide. And you do this exercise actually standing up. And this word stand up could be looked into context. It is a stand-up meeting because you conduct this meeting standing up. Or when you stand up, you get tired. As you can see from this gentleman over here and this gentleman over here. He is actually leaning against the wall or against the pillar, and he's taking support of the pillar. So that means these two gentlemen are getting tired. So for them, they would want this meeting to be over as soon as possible. So that is the essentially the meaning of standing up. So if you remain standing up for a long time, you will get tired. So you would like to keep the meeting short. So as I said earlier, such meetings are carried out where you cannot wait for long to be able to meet and discuss a problem. You want to do it quickly, and the stand-up meetings provide you that forum. Then is the retrospective. We have already discussed this when we discussed quality. Let me repeat. In those projects or in adaptive projects, not on the waterfall projects or not on the predictive projects, but on adaptive projects, the type of projects where you do not, where you don't see through till the end of the tunnel. You don't have enough information. You are undergoing what is known as progressive elaboration. That means you do not have enough information. So you are conducting this project in phases, in steps, what is known as an adaptive project. And these steps are referred to as iterations. So when you are doing an adaptive project or doing iterations in an adaptive project, what you do is you meet and discuss how is that step or that phase or iteration gone. This meeting is referred to as retrospective. Why retrospective? Retrospective means looking at the past. You look at what you have done. Are you satisfied with it? If you are satisfied with the results of this step, then you can proceed to the next step or to the next iteration or to the next phase. This retrospective is shown as a diamond. That means you have to take a decision. What decision? Whether to go ahead and proceed and progress to the next step or phase, or to repeat the previous step. In fact, this is also a sort of Deming's loop. You keep doing this until such time you are satisfied with the results of the iteration, in which case you can progress. This retrospective, or the point at which you do this, is also referred to as the phase gate or the toll gate, like the toll gate of a motorway or a highway, or the exit gate. Why? Because we are exiting the previous iteration and moving into the next one. Or we can also say the entry gate. Why? Because we are entering into the next phase. So this is essentially what the concept of retrospective is. In many presentations I have come across, people have referred to this figure of 8 as an example of retrospective. That means you carry out an iteration, and then you carry out a retrospective meeting, and then you enter into the iteration again. This is slightly meeting and slightly confusing. It tends to tell you that you are not perhaps satisfied satisfied with the results of the with the iteration. Therefore, you would like to repeat it and continue this process, unending process. So this could be considered as the correct diagram if perhaps they had, instead of mentioning iteration, they would have mentioned previous iteration oblique next iteration. Previous iteration oblique next iteration, then it would have given the same meaning as this diagram which I have made. So in my opinion, this is slightly misleading. I will now discuss what the other tool, which is what is interpersonal and team skills, which includes observing, conversing, discussing, entering into a dialogue, and listening. Listening, active and passive listening. Well, listening is supposed to be passive. So what is this active listening? So let me share my thoughts with you on active listening. Active listening is that listening in which you want to make, in which you want to really understand something so that you have absolute clarity on what has been said. And this you can do by taking notes, by nodding or using other body language, and asking questions. And there are a few more things which you should do if you have to listen actively. And now recall what I have been saying in that class. I've been stressing upon you again and again to take notes, bring your notes, take your notes, and then ask questions. If you don't do that, then I'm afraid you're not active listening, you are passive listening. And passive listening is nothing different from hearing. You are just hearing the teacher or the facilitator. You are really not benefiting much if you do not listen actively. And then, of course, these skills help you determine the most appropriate way to update and communicate project performance, and then help identify issue and solve them. If there is a conflict between any two project team members, then of course you have to use your soft skills to solve that conflict between the project team members. So interpersonal and team skills are important. Please use them frequently in your parlance with the project team members. I will now discuss some of the common communication mistakes we make. And first is this azab called autocorrection. And then not reviewing the work before, not reviewing the draft before hitting the send button and ending up in all sorts of problems. During my naval days, I once got promoted to the next rank, and one very senior officer sent me a letter of congratulations. And this letter read something like this: on your promotion to this rank, on your promotion, I extend you my heartfelt congratulations. Sorry, it wasn't like that. It went something like, sorry, my memory is not with me at the moment. It said something like this: I extend you heartiest congratulations on this suspicious occasion. Suspicious occasion. Now, what happened was that if you look at your keyboard, the A and S keys are right next to each other. So instead of pressing the A key, which would have meant auspicious occasion, which was the right word, he typed suspicious occasion. Well, I did not refer this letter back to him, but if I had, just imagine the amount of embarrassment he would have undergone. So always edit and review your work before you send it. And if you review your work, you can prevent such grave errors which can occur, like, let us eat, grandpa. What happens if you have missed comma? It will read, let's eat, grandpa. Obviously, it is not going to augur well with the grandpa. So review, edit, review. Here is another example. We are going to learn to cut and paste, kids. And if you miss that strategic comma here, We are going to learn to cut and paste kids. How embarrassing it could be for the parents of these kids. So the importance of reviewing your draft and editing your draft. Please do it before you hit the send button on your email or on your WhatsApp or whatever you're using. Next point is never deliver bad news in written or by email. You may have come across such communications, emails or letters. The Prime Minister of Pakistan is pleased to remove you from the job of Chairman KPT, as it has recently happened. How can the Prime Minister be pleased to do such a nasty job? How can you drive pleasure by sacking someone? So never deliver bad news in written. You could always call that person either physically or you could call him by telephone. Go over the reasons for your action. Be respectful to him and then give him some hope that, look, it is only a temporary measure. I hope we will be able to get you back on the project. Words to that effect. So never ever break or deliver bad news either in writing or by email. Then avoid difficult conversations. What I want to say is, because the title is mistakes, and what I'm saying is that this is a mistake, avoiding difficult conversations and not being assertive. We always try to avoid a meeting. Why? Because we think it is difficult. No meeting, no conversation is difficult if you prepare. And then get into the habit of saying no. No which is said once is far better than a series of yeses which you cannot follow through. So say so now, straight away. Don't make promises which you cannot fulfill. You will say, yes, I'll be able to, I'll do it. Yes, don't worry. Yes. Give me a few more days. Why don't you say, no, sorry, I cannot do it? And say it once. In fact, the person to whom you say no will feel much happier. He or she may feel upset momentarily, but after that effect is gone, they will have more respect for you, that at least you were more straightforward and honest with them, and you were not just putting them into a situation of what we call lara laga diya. So don't ever make promises which you cannot fulfill. Say no upfront. Then react. We react. We do not respond. Reacting is bad. Responding is good. Whenever you are faced with a petition, don't assume, don't have the mindset that the petition is wrong. Don't react to the petition. Respond to the petition. See what the person is saying. Maybe, and in most of the cases that is the case, the person does have a genuine issue. So respond, do not react. I can give you hundreds of examples, but we can discuss that in the live session if you wish. What is responding and what is reacting? But by responding, we mean that read the petition or listen to the person carefully, actively. And maybe he has a genuine problem, and then respond to whatever his problem is. Don't undergo a condition of knee jerk कि नहीं ये तो गलत है या ऐसा हो नहीं सकता. Everything is possible nowadays. So listen actively to the petitioner and then respond. Then don't use a one-size-fits-all approach to communication. You will not send an email to a Mazdoor, and you will not send a handwritten note scribbled on a yellow sticker to the CEO. That is one size doesn't fit all approach. Adopt that. So look at the status of a person before finding the right channel of communications with him. Not keeping an open mind when meeting new people. And again, I think this bullet is best summed up in this Urdu dictum. I think it is a verse. मुझसे पहले उस गली में मेरे फसाने गए. Keep an open mind when you meet new people. Listen to, well, of course you can't refuse any pre-feedback on the person. Oh, so-and-so is joining you? Oh, usse bach ke rehna. He's a bad person. He would create problems for you. But when he joins when that person joins the company, join your project, you find him to be a very, very good project team member. Precisely to the opposite to what you have been briefed. Why? Because whosoever is briefing you on that person who is joining you may have a personal interest in that person. He may be a friend or foe of that person. If he is a foe, he will brief you negatively. If he is a friend, he will brief you positively. Oh, so-and-so is joining your organization? Oh, wonderful. He's going to turn your organization around. You will have nothing to worry. And when he actually joins your organization, you find him to be a miscreant, a trouble creator. So keep an open mind when you meet new people. Miscommunication, assuming that your message has been understood or you have understood others' message. How do you do that? If you are sending an email, put a line or very respectfully, please acknowledge. Like whenever I have important communications for your class, I always write for your CRs. Please acknowledge. And by the way, I sent you a video last night on regression analysis requesting the CRs to acknowledge. I'm still waiting for that acknowledgement. So please do not assume that your message has been understood until and unless it has been acknowledged. So I don't know whether or not you have seen that video, which I sent you last night on regression analysis, because I have received no acknowledgement. Accidentally violating others' privacy. You can accidentally send an email to the wrong addressee. Please make sure that you have the right addresses against to, against CC, and against BCC. Because if your email is incriminating and it ends up with the wrong addressee, he or she can take you to the cleaners. Also remember that now we have cyber laws in place. If you accidentally violate someone's privacy, he can report to you under cyber laws. So be very careful. Nowadays, as soon as you start composing an email, and hit the to button and write A, all the addresses whose names start with A will appear. And you can accidentally, particularly if you suffer from parallax error, can enter the wrong addressing. Similarly, make sure that your attachment, which you have, the attachment your attachment to the message is correct. So before sending the message, actually open the attachment after you have attached it, not before you have attached it, but after you have attached it, open it and see whether that is indeed the right attachment. Otherwise, you can commit this error. Then too little communication leads to anxiety. It leads to voids. And too much communication leads to annoyance, which I have already described. And finally, do not create barriers, communication barriers and blockers. What are barriers? Barriers are difficulties. Do not introduce extra channels of communication. Do not introduce bureaucratic hurdles in communication. That is barriers. Do not introduce sectarian barriers in your project organization. Do not introduce ethnic barriers in your project communications. Do not introduce linguistic barriers in your project communications. And do not introduce blockers. Blockers is stoppage of communications. For example, if you offend someone, he or she is most likely going to block you, and you will lose all communication with that person. So do not create a situation where you are blocked. So be very careful, weigh your words when you communicate. And the final slide, here are a few basic questions which you can ask yourself. Can the project manager monitor all communications? Of course not. It is a Himalayan task to do that. Okay, we understand that it is not possible to do that, but should the project manager at least try to monitor all communications? Yes, he should try. Why? Because if he doesn't, then there will be changes, miscommunications, unclear directions. Scope creep can occur because of lack of communications or because of not monitoring communications. Or you can accidentally violate some privacy, as we were discussing on the last slide. And the final question, what percentage of the project manager's time is spent on communicating? Well, the research says about 90%. When we say 90%, it doesn't necessarily mean talking person to person or sending emails. It also means conducting meetings, preparing for the meetings, preparing the meetings minutes, preparing reports, etc. That all is included. It is 90%. It doesn't necessarily mean that a project manager is talking or sending emails or is on WhatsApp for 90% of the time. No, that's not what it means. With that, we come to the end of this session. Thank you for joining me. I wish you well, and Allah Hafiz.